Hello there as well for the YouTube, as we are recording right now. Welcome to one of the last episodes for our poor Zovaal to go through. As Zovaal last time went into the Shadowlands, redeemed himself, and has now been allowed to actually kill things. Was that on purpose? Did he earn that? Well, a little bit. You know, he did go to Shadowlands and learned how a very naughty jailer he was. But also, I got really desperate during the mount farming. I really want Mimiron's head. And I was like, okay, Gods of Warcraft, this is my last character that I can use. Please give me the mount. And it didn't. So, I can no longer say that Zovaal has never killed. In fact, he has killed a lot. He has killed 131 things now. All of them in Ulduar. And no mounts. Dang it. But all the same, he has gone through Shadowlands. And as we talked about last time, Shadowlands was a big period, of course, in the history of WoW. As with Shadowlands, more so during the gameplay, I would argue, but also a big part during the story. A lot of people decided to take breaks. Some made big videos about it, big proclamations. And others just took a break, go did something else, and came back later. All the same, Dragonflight introduced a brand new race, the Dragfear. And it was going to take us into a new adventure of sorts. And while I'm definitely going to be pointing out some of the things that I really disliked about the storyline of Dragonflight, I will also point out some of the things that I really loved about the story of Dragonflight. All in all, I will give Dragonflight massive props for how far it had to go. Like, the trust, the outlook, the everything, the view on World of Warcraft was not exactly great. And so they brought it back to basics. They were like, here's some cool dragons, here's a cool story, like a little island adventure. Let's see where we stand, right? And with that in mind, from seeing how far they had to go, I have nothing but massive respect for the development team and Dragonflight as a whole. And what happened was, they decided to do a bit of a time skip between Shadowlands and Dragonflight. And I believe that the time skip is like 5 years. And in that time, nothing happens. And that is an issue. Because in that time, you'd imagine that the world still evolved. Things still happened, right? Like Anduin was on his journey. And we had like Turellian and Greymane. On the Horde, they now have like this council. And the armistice is signed. And Sylvan has been brought to justice. Like a lot of things happened. But in the time skip, we don't really learn what happened to Azeroth. It's like the world has stood still for a while. Lorthmar and Phlistra got married. And they got a book where they go on a honeymoon. Would have been awesome to actually see that marriage in-game as well, you know? And unfortunately, the time skip has not been evolved in a way that we can actually see the storyline. And this has come to play with a more recent storyline with the Pride of Arathi, where we see a Dun of Trollbane make mention about how the Sons of Lothar, how they are all about like peace and equality. Paraphrasing, but like, you know. And that is very much different than where they started out from. It's very much different than what he was back in Battle for Azeroth. But you could argue that in that time skip, his mind changed. He's older, he, you know, doesn't want war anymore. But the issue is that if you don't tell what happened to those characters in a time skip, if you don't get people on that journey, then it becomes hard to sell the idea of, oh yeah, they've had a change of heart. There's not an arc there, right? Having a time skip is not just a free write-off, as in you can just fill in whatever the characters say, because it gets to the point where it's like, okay, is that still Trollbane or is that a Dreadlord, right? But all the same, we had a time skip, and then the Dragon Isles started to wake up. And I'm trying to remember, because in the intro cutscene, we should totally check out the intro cutscene, because it's actually important. Let's go check it out. Let's go check it out. Because there's a reason as to why the Dragon Isles woke up. Sayarina, hello there. In the past, the Dragon Isles were there. Oh, we actually should talk about the War of the Scaleborn as well, right? Oh, we should, actually. Let's first do the cutscene, shall we? Cinematics. Dragonflight. I want the one about that one. "10,000 years ago, which is the War of the Ancients, right? That was the time period with Azara. Well, if eternity, world sundering.
It cries out in pain. We must go to its aid. We entrust our ancestral home to you, the Watchers.
It really does, Lieta. It's like such a key moment in the history. A lot of stories are pinned on the ending of the War of the Ancients. And far too many lands have been hidden by mist, let me tell you.
Let the land slumber, hidden even from our own eyes. You will feel our return in the waking of the land. Then you must light the beacon of Tearhold.
Hi, Sky.
Lest the path home be lost to us forever.
Yeah. And I remember, like, the elements woke up. But I'm trying to remember, have they ever given a reason as to why the elements woke up? But I think it's because Azeroth was, like, healing. So the jailer attacked her. And then in that time skip over the 5 years, I'm guessing that the elements were getting stronger because Azeroth was healing or something. Like, for some reason, the elements woke up. If they've given, like, a proper source, by all means, correct me on that one, team. But yeah, for 10,000 years, the Dragon Isles have been hidden a little bit longer than they expected it would. And now the elements are rising up. Tony Stoney is like, oh, I got a job to do now. Let me go ahead and reactivate the beacon. Was it Azerite, you think? But the jailer did still sucky your soul, though, right? So he walks around and he's like, huh. We were supposed to reactivate this whole tier beacon. And we kinda didn't. Let me get on that. Ah, my absolute pleasure, Sky. Happy that you're enjoying them. Ah, thank you. Gonna shave soon. And I remember watching this cutscene as well. Like, the first time around, and I was like, this is not an exciting cutscene. Because I already knew that he was gonna open up the beacon. Like, it wasn't a surprise. And they spent a really long time for him to climb up that tower. Thankfully, they did a second one that I was like, okay, that is way more exciting. The whole, you know, flying around and being like, there's that Razaketh. That second one actually got me excited. This one is more of like, you know, more mellowed out. But then they did the War Within one. And that one was not boring, but that one was all about emotions and mellowed out and, you know. But there he goes. Yeah, like, this cutscene did not sell me on the idea, like, especially when you look back at all the other cutscenes. Where it's like war and fighting and clashing. And it's like, ah, cool, you can do it, bro. Yeah. Midnight next month, I imagine. We're gonna get midnight announcement at Gamescom. It depends, maybe they went to, like, the elemental planes or something. So they do the job. They get rid of the mists. And I think they made mention that the Dragon Isles were already calling. And so Alexstrasza and crew were already looking around. But I will say, either these dragons got some mega speed on them, or they were right on top of the isle. Either, you know, because that is quite the catch right there. And I know, it's cinematic, you know. But I'm just saying, those dragons were chilling above the mists. They knew exactly where home was. This beacon did nothing. Did nothing.
The world is healing.
Yay, the world is healing!
But her fate is yet uncertain. Together, we shall be Azeroth's protectors once again. Here, the new age of dragons shall begin.
Yeah! New Age dragons, let's go! Let's go! Akamai, New Age Dragons. The world is healing, yeah. So, the world is healing. For whatever that might mean. I guess it's healing because there's nobody sucking on her soul anymore. I guess, like, the world is healing. That's what we go with. And so the Isle's waking up. But a big part of the story on the Dragon Isles is related to something called the War of the Scaleborn, which is a war explained, sadly, not in the game, but in a book. Is the book required? Not really. Like, we understand that we got, like, these primal incarnates that are enemies now. We need to take care of them. Like, on a phase level, you perfectly fine understand what the story is supposed to be in-game. But the War of the Scaleborn adds a lot to it, in my opinion. So let's talk about it. Okay. Think. Right. Racking my brain here. Once upon a time, there was a Galagrond. Big old dragon. Mutated proto-dragon. And at the time, this is something that we actually learned from the novel Dawn of the Aspects. This was like the big moment of the dragon aspects coming together in order to overcome this big threat. They were asked by Keeper Tyr, like, hey, can you help me out with this? And they were like, sure, let's do it. And they took it out because Galagrond was a big threat for all the proto-dragons. Galagrond became big and mutated and all these eyes on them. And he started to eat his own kind. And then that wasn't good enough for him, so he started to puke out his own kind. They became zombies, and then he ate his own kind again. That is how big and massive and hungry Galagrond became. So a big problem, right? And they took him out, it was great. In Dragonflight, we learn that the corruption of Galagrond might be more than just random chance. And we read about this in a report about Tyr's Halls. So there was a dungeon called, let me open it up, the Halls of Infusion. And what we learn is that the transformation from proto-dragons into dragons, experiments on their kinds were done by Keeper Tyr. And he was in contact with Keeper Odin, and he was talking about using like these life-giving waters from Azeroth. And some way, somehow, Yogg-Saron's corruption got in there. It infected Galagrond. But Tyr, he was sure that it wouldn't happen again, right? And then he started to offer a transformation to the proto-dragons. He was like, hey, we worked very nicely together on this problem that I may or may not have created with Galagrond. How about you all sign up and you come help defend the world with us? And they were like, cool, let's do it. Except not all of their kinds wanted to join the will of the Titans. They saw this transformation from Proto into Dragon. They saw this as like, I don't want to sign up with Order. What are you talking about? And at first, they were all high and mighty. And they were like, oh, don't worry about it. You don't have to join. Don't have to. But eventually they were like, we kind of need more numbers. Well, these proto-dragons, they got all these eggs in the wild, right? They're not doing anything. Most of the time, they're just kind of abandoned by their parents. What if we have our little Titan Keeper robot thingies just collect those eggs? We infuse them, turn them into dragons. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, no harm, no foul, right? Except, not all of the eggs were abandoned. And now you got a situation in which they have been abducting the children of the proto-dragons and transforming them. Drama. What is happening? Howdy, Morticia. Enjoy the Kuan. So, there were proto-dragons there. They were like, we don't want the will of the Titans. Go F yourself. You are not so glorious and great as you are. And if memory serves, it was Firak who found something. Firak found some sort of power, some sort of ritual, and this elevated him from basic fire proto-dragon into the badass primal incarnate that he became. The big old Firak that he became, right? And he showed this ritual to Iridikron. And Iridikron is kind of like the counterpart to Deathwing, like very strategically sound, also connected to Earth and like really clever, right? Full on against the will of the Titans. Whereas Firak was like a cousin of Alexstrasza and he taught her how to hunt, right? And then there was Razagev. And Razagev was like tumultuous and like the storm and all that good stuff. Wasn't it the other way around? Iridicron showing Firak the ritual. Hang on. Who found the ritual? Firak or Iridicron? He was the one who taught Alexstrasza how to hunt? Right. Firak was the first proto-dragon to infuse himself with elemental energies, the very first primal incarnates. Despite Firak being the first incarnate, the one who rallied proto-dragons to join the army, he was usurped as leader by Iridicron. So, yeah. Iridicron was Neltharian, but more points in IQ. Yeah, without, like, the cheaty void ways. Right? So Raszageth was like the storm and all that, and Raszageth was really close friends with Viranov. And Viranov was really close friends with Alexstrasza. And Viranov for the longest time was like, I don't want any part in this. Y'all like your primalists and y'all like your titans. I don't want any of this. I want to do my thing. I want to live my life. Leave me alone. Leave me the fuck alone. I just want to be friendly with everybody. Even with an Iridicron constantly be like, would you not like to join us as a primal incarnate? We could increase your power. You could join us. Maybe we could, go out on a date one time. And Viranov was like, nah, it's not for me. Thank you very much. But then she found out about the kidnapping of the Dragon Eggs and the forced transformation into their kind becoming dragons. And that was somewhat of a foundation of this whole War of the Scaleborn, right? Because both sides were wary of each other. They were thinking like, Iridicron is marching his army, he's getting units together, he's getting all these primalists in an army, they're all powerful and whatnot, we need to be prepared, right? And they in turn looked at that like, you don't need to be prepared for us, but if you're going to take our children and turn them into dragons, then that is a big no-no, what are you doing? So, at some point, in being prepared for what is to come, we see the genius of Neltharian on display. And we gotta keep in mind, Neltharian, aka Deathwing, is already listening to the whispers of the void, right? He is already crawling in his cave. He is already going like, oh, get out of my head. But what's interesting is that, if I remember it right, because I'm really, I don't want to give you wrong information, but if I remember right, what was interesting is that the whispers of the void during this war, they were talking down on him. They were like, you are a worthless insect. You will never be able to fulfill the mission of the Titans. You won't be able to protect the world. Those primal incarnates are going to dominate you. They're going to take you over. You are nothing. And what I found interesting is because is that in the time of the War of the Ancients, with like the whole Dragon Soul storyline, they were feeding into his ego and telling him how great he was and how Ysera and Alexstrasza should be his mates and he should be the one ruling the world and he's the best. You could do it. You could do it. So I found it interesting how they broke him down and then built him up with their whispers. I thought that was kind of cool. So he's listening to the whispers of the void, but he's trying to push it back, right? He's trying not to do anything with it. He has gotten his own plans in mind. And his plans, they contain Drakfear. Drakfear are these experiments by Neltharian to make like these units that would follow his commands. He had like these gauntlets that would control them. And they would be his soldiers. And in truth, these Drakfear were loyal to a T to Neltharian, except his ego, his fear, his pride would not let him rely on any other troops. He needed to be in control. He needed to be the daddy, right? So he needed a gauntlet in order to control them. So by the time that Raszageth, by somewhat accident, discovers his training operations, his Drakfear, and she starts blasting, and she gets told by like a black dragon, that's a traitor black dragon, that's because not all the dragons were down with actually being dragons, right? She gets told, like, hit the gauntlet, and she hits the gauntlet, and Neltharian looks at that, he's like, oh, snap! Now I have no control of my forces. And this is actually part of like one of those videos that they did with Nosdormu. The Drakfear look around, they're blinking, they're like distorted, and Raszageth and crew, they go hammy. And then he hears it. Back of his mind. Neltharian. Not for us to tell you how to do your job, right? But I'm just saying. Offers on the table as it's always been. You wanna... You know? You want to bring some tentacles into this party. And Deathwing was like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's do it. Open up like a big old void gate. They teleport Raszageth into like the into the prison area over there. They make it a prison area, right? Teleported in. He would not have won that fight, or maybe he would have, but he did not win that fight based on his own intellect or powers. Nah. He embraced the powers of the void. Raszageth was imprisoned. And the war took another step, because finding out that her sister Raszageth had been imprisoned by the Aspects, well, let's just say that Viranov was not exactly happy about that. She now finally accepted the offer of, hey, become part of our Primal Incarnate team. It's gonna be great. We're gonna have war against these order-enforcing Aspects. And it did. Like, the whole war played out, blah, 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 tactics and stuff. Virak was outplayed, and by manipulating him, they were able to teleport him into the Vault of the Incarnates. The Vault, at that point, had been created in order to contain the Incarnates, right? Like, that's where they were broke out. So, Virak was imprisoned. And then, I'm trying to remember... I think Viranov and Iridikron went out at the same time, but Viranov was like fairly defeated by Alexstrasza and like imprisoned and put into the vault. But the battle with Iridikron was between Neltharian and Iridikron. And Iridikron was this really cool character described in the books as this master schemer, this master planner, this master manipulator of the earth. At some point, Virak dares to speak out against him, and he's like, "What did you say to me, little worm?" And he like opens up the ground and he puts Virak in there, and he's like, "I could suffocate the life out of you." Like, Iridikron was a fucking mastermind badass, alright? And the same happened when Neltharian dared to confront him in his own lair. He's like, aspect of Earth, my ass, I am Iridikron. And again, Neltharian has to rely on the Void in order to win that battle, which Iridikron, at the time, makes fun of. It's like, you're using the Void, you're giving yourself to those powers, you're already dead. Maiwa Shinderu Nani! And so, Iridikron in the vault, Viranov in the vault. The Aspects had won the War of the Scaleborn. Discussions happened amongst their people about, you know, what it meant to become dragons, and, you know, these children, without asking, were being transformed into beings, right? And they had to come to terms with that. And some of them were A-okay with becoming dragons, and others were like, I don't know. But yeah, that's the history of the War of the Scaleborn. And then we return 20,000 years later to, like, the Dragon Isles. They locked up the Dragon Isles, as we saw in the cutscene, 10,000 years ago. They couldn't find it, and now it's reawakening because Azeroth is healing, and that means that the elements are wakening up. And for some reason, I don't know if they actually specified why. Trying to think now. I don't think that we have a reason for it. Why did Raszageth break out of prison? I'm trying to remember now. And why did the Dragfear wake up? Was that also due to the elements waking up? Maybe. Grim Totem freed her. She was busted out. Yeah, but Grim Totem... Like, they were in contact with each other, right? So how come... So how come they were able to communicate with each other? Because he was imprisoned, so... This is McGawful. Shamanism type stuff? Okay. And were the Dragon Isles in stasis, or did life for the other race continue? So, the Dragfear, after Neltharian lost control over them, with the help of his... of Malygos, of his brother Malygos, they were put in stasis. So they were put as slumber and, you know, magicified, you know, under the ground, you know, project locked away. And they would wake up. I don't know if they give us a reason as to why they woke up, but I'm gonna write it off as elements woke up, so therefore the Dragfear woke up as well. We would see Rephion and Ebonhorn show up on the Isle, checking out what was happening, like the call of the Dragon Isles. And they found out that there was something happening there. And I need to show you that cutscene, because that would give context, that would explain a lot more.
Mistress of the storm, the primal powers have risen to set you free.
Yeah. Rephion is having a hard time here. Uh-oh. Yeah, Elements sing. I'm gonna assume, you know, Elements waking up.
A new age.
Not gonna lie. Razagav was sick. Storm Chicken.
Found my kin.
We know where they are imprisoned, Storm Eater.
Soon, their bonds will be broken. And what is this? The brood of Neltharian. I felt his demise reverberate through the earth, and reveled in it. Perhaps you wish to share his fate.
I had wished to become what he was meant to be. What he should have been.
You do not fathom what dragonkind was meant to be. But you will. Go. Tell them we will scour this world of the Titan's stain. Let the storm be the harbinger of our return.
Whoa. So that is how she was released from prison. Like a storm on the Isle. For a while they will be locked away. With the Dragfear joining either the Alliance or the Horde. And also a couple of their factions flying out and be like, I'm not going to serve anyone anymore. Because they felt betrayed, right? Like Neltharian had just locked them away. And all they had ever done was their job. What they were created for. So they felt betrayed. They're like, we're not going to follow any kind of aspect anymore. The addition of the Dragfear and of course the call of the Dragon Isles also meant that we were going to join the aspects in Return to the Ancestral Home. If you're wondering who that was Kurok Grimtotem. And the really cool part about Kurok Grimtotem is that he is the student of Magalfa, a prize pupil of Magalfa Grimtotem. Now you might say, oh cool, is Magalfa going to be part of this story? Is that related to any of this? No. No, it's just fluff, but we'll get to the complaining part about that in just a moment. Which brings us to the actual entering the Dragon Isles. Like, we come here with our ships. We fly in, and in the first area, the Waking Shores, we deal with... So the general idea was that once upon a time, they had fought against the Prime Incarnates, and they stood no chance against them, right? Well, they barely won the war, but now they've lost the aspect of Earth. Caligos is the new aspect of the Blues because Malygos was slain, but they've also been massively depowered at the end of the Cataclysm. They were like, we don't even have our aspectral powers anymore. How are we supposed to stand up against these Primal Incarnates? And so the idea became that if they could reaffirm their oaths that they had taken towards the Titans, towards their kind, if they could reaffirm those and re-empower those pillars, then perhaps, they would have a chance at getting their powers back. That was kind of the hope, that was kind of the idea. And what a good opportunity for us to learn more about the dragons and life on the Dragon Isles, right? So, on this one we had two storylines. On the one hand, we had the Black Dragonflight with Rephion and Ebonhorn going in. And, well, mainly Rephion, to be honest. And, of course, the Black Dragonflight has a history of corruption, of destruction. There is the Black Dragon aspect, Deathwing, that we spoke about earlier. He had fallen to the corruption of the Void, to the Whispers, had done massive damage to the Dragonflights, to the world of Azeroth as a whole, had basically forsaken his duty as being the Guardian of the Earth. That was he was in charge for. And unfortunately, that was no longer a thing. But his corruption also spread further. You might remember fighting against beings like Onyxia or Neltharian, right? His madness was part of his flight, not just him. So, over time, with the Black Dragonflight, we'd see different things develop, different things play out. On the one hand, we would have Sibelian on Outland. Sibelian was part of the trio, like Onyxia, Neltharian, and then there was Sibelian. And Sibelian had joined Deathwing all the way back in the days of, like, the first Horde, where the plan was that they were going to help the Horde get some artifacts on Azeroth, and in exchange, the Horde was going to take some Black Dragon Eggs to Outlands, which they did. And then Khadgar did battle with Deathwing, where he did like his hocus pocus magic on the plates, on the screws that were holding the plates on Deathwing together, which caused Deathwing to retreat, because they were also fighting against like Gruul the Dragon Killer, that you might remember as a raid boss back in the Burning Crusade. Even now, if you go to the Blade's Edge Mountains, there's like a whole bunch of black dragons on spikes and all that. But in that area, we would also see Sibelian hanging out. And Sibelian, I believe he became friends with Rexxar, but for the longest time, he just stayed there. In the Outland period, he just stayed there, being Sibelian, right? Then we have the Cataclysm, and in the Cataclysm, we dealt with the Deathwing arc. Deathwing came back once more, we did the Dragon Soul, we did everything, and we also did something unheard of. We did something unique at the time. One of the Red Dragons, I believe she was called Rhea Straza, had captured a Black Dragon and like forced it to lay eggs. And then we gathered like whelp corpses, and we gathered other Black Dragon eggs, but we also gathered like a special Titan Mephingamabub, and we combined all of that. We did some experimentation, and we created something not seen on Azeroth in thousands and thousands of years. We created an uncorrupted Black Dragon. We created Rephion. And Rephion was part of this amazing questline back in the Cataclysm with like... it was the legendary questline for rogues, in which he had broken out of his egg, and he was breaking people's legs, literally breaking people's legs. He was sending out assassins to take out corrupted members of his flight, and even eventually take on his father Deathwing. With like the fangs of the father, you get like a weapon. Legendary. Was awesome, right? It was absolutely awesome. Up to the point where Rephion is like, okay, job done. I can hear the mists disappearing. It is time for the next expansion. I'll see you in Pandaria. And we did. And in Pandaria, he became more than just a quest giver for rogues. He became a quest giver for all of us. Part of the legendary Cloak questline. Mr. Pandaria Classic is around the corner. I would highly recommend to check out the questline. I also got a video up on the channel. Where basically Rephion has seen a vision. He has seen the coming of the Legion. And in his mind, there is no way that the divided Azeroth can stand... the divided universe can stand what is to come. Oh my god. It never ends. In his mind, a divided Azeroth cannot stand against what is to come. So he decides... can't. It's too hot for this. Okay. So he decides to meddle. He also becomes besties with Anduin. Some would argue maybe a little bit more than besties. But he would manipulate things between the Alliance and the Horde. Adielex. And, you know, he saw the war play out between Garrosh and Varian, Alliance and the Horde. You know, Mr. Pandaria, all the good stuff. And at some point, he started to bank on the Alliance winning. He thought that if the Alliance had won the war, Varian would wipe out the Horde. Bada bing, bada boom. There would be one unified Azeroth to stand ready against the coming of the Legion. That did not work out, and he was quite pissed. He should have done like Anti-Onyxia, take over the throne room himself, right? But all the same, you know, one plan failed, another might work. So he worked together with the Bronze Dragon Kairos. He went to the trial of Garrosh, he pushed Anduin back into the closet, and he helped set Garrosh free to take him into an alternate reality. Because if a unified Azeroth was not going to be a thing, then how about we just make a bunch of hordes and we have those hordes stand with us against the coming Legion. As often it happens, you know, if you try to fight against destiny, you make it happen. Rephion's actions would actually cause the coming of the Legion. But that's neither here nor there, because he didn't play a part in those moments. He kind of just disappeared. He did not even show up when the Legion was there. He was part of the beta, but didn't really happen. And now he's back with Dragonflight. Oh, no, sorry, with Battle for Azeroth. I should actually remember that, because Blizzard didn't. Oh, venomous. But it's true. In Battle for Azeroth, Rephion came back into the storyline. Because turns out, Rephion was not as unique as he led us to believe. He was not the sole survivor of the Black Dragonflight. Not only was there still Sibelian on Outlands, we also met someone in Legion in High Mountain called Ebonhorn. And Ebonhorn was also a uncorrupted Black Dragon, cleansed with a Titan relic, the Hammer of Kaskarov, way back when. And he's been guiding the chieftains of the High Mountain Torrents for generations. A bit of a pickle when he leaves High Mountain and all of a sudden the void attacks. But don't worry, Rephion has not been sitting on his hands as he nearly sent the world into destruction with the Legion. He has been doing research. He's been going into the Tower of Karazhan. He's been communing with like the spirit of Medivh. He's been written books and articles. He's been doing research. Anything and everything he could in order to fight back against the corruption of the Void. Rephion was not going to follow the path of his daddy. He was going to do something else. And so he once again helped us create a cloak. This time, not the legendary cloak of Mop. He made us a cloak which would allow us to not instantly fall to the madness of N'Zoth. He showed up back to Anduin. You might imagine Anduin was kind of pissed off at him after he pushed him back into the closet. So Anduin punched him and everything was fine. We also did like visions with Rephion, and over time, basically he became our expert on the old gods. And I want you to keep that in mind. Rephion became our expert on the old gods and how to stay off their corruption. I want to keep that in mind, because Blizzard didn't, alright? So now we have 3 black dragons out there. We got Ebonhorn, we got Rephion, who we're talking like, oh, we're brothers now. And then there's Sebelian, kind of forgotten in Outlands. But the Dragon Isles are here. It is time to party. And Rephion has it in his head, like, I'm gonna become leader. I'm going to become Aspect. I'm going to be leader of the Black Dragonflight. Not per se in power, because who knows if that's even possible. But he wanted to go for the title of Aspect. Now, I would argue, Rephion, old buddy, old pal, I love you. But Aspect of whom? Aspect of whom? Because there are no other Black Dragons. You killed them all. Who are you going to lead, right? Did you hide some of them somewhere? I thought you were like the last one standing. What happened here? But either way, he was really intent on becoming the leader of a nearly dead flight. But what did you know it? Sebelian was also really intent on becoming the leader of their flight. And Sebelian had Dragon Axe because he was still on Outlands. Now, some way, somehow, he was able to protect those Dragon Axe because in the olden days, Outlands, Draenor transformed into Outlands, and those Black Dragon Eggs got blasted with like magic from the Twisted Nether. They became Nether Dragons. But some way, somehow, Sebelian is still able to reproduce them, making Dragon Eggs. He's got the future of their flight in his hands. But who is going to lead their flight? Is it going to be Rephion? Is it going to be Sebelian? Who's going to be? Who's going to be? Guess what? You get to decide. You get to sign up with either Sebelian or Rephion, help them out, represent them, do quests for them, earn reputation, earn rewards. You are going to fight over who gets to be the next top model Aspect. Until we get further into the storyline, but we're going to get there in a moment. On the other hand, we have the Red Dragonflight. And the Red Dragonflight is more about the ruby pools, the whelplings. You know, you gotta imagine, like, it's... Dragons have not exactly been doing fantastic, you know, the reproduction and all that. But there's also a much more interesting question, which is Alexstrasza allowing basically the corruption of the Titans, the enforcement of order upon their children, right? It's a big part of their history that she never really spoke about. But we help out with like the ruby life pools, and we fight against the primalists, and we safeguard the lands. Rephion also helps as Razageth shows up, and they're doing like the roars, and we're doing the fighting, all the good stuff. So we help out both sides, we help out both factions, and then we go into the Onaran Plains. And the Onaran Plains is green Dragonflight territory. For some reason, Blizzard decided that they should redo the story of the Centaur. And I'm not exactly sure why. Because we have Centaur on Azeroth, but these Centaur were there back during the... Like, the Dragon Isles have been locked away for like 10,000 years. And the Centaur, I believe the Centaur that we know from Desolace did not exist back in the day. So these are like earlier versions of the Centaur. They were locked away in the Dragon Isles. And then life found a way, nature replayed, and they returned. And the story of these Centaur, I'm trying to remember now. Right. The thing that got me going about them was that they basically redid the story of High Mountain. As in, a couple of Centaur clans, one is the more hostile, aggressive one, bring them all together, overtopple the bad one, and bada bing, bada boom, you bring peace back to these lands. The major thing that I would say, like, oh shit, that was cool that came out of this zone, was Teyvan. If you don't know Teyvan is a really cute side quest line. And eventually they made Teyvan the reward of the Battle for Azeroth meta mounts. And it's massive in size. It's awesome. If you haven't gotten Teyvan yet, it is great. But the more, like, in more intricacies, you know, the Centaur here had, like, an allegiance with the Green Dragonflight. They work together, and they have the Wild God that is connected to Halnheim Mountain's legendary bow, and that is the spirit of... Come on, it's the bird, you could do it! It's the Onara. It's Onara, because it's called the Onaran Plains. Duh! And we see that these Centaur that have allied themselves with the Primalists, they're trying to overtake the Wild God. They're trying to take its power. What is interesting to note as well is that one of the Primalists that works with them in this area, they are a Night Elf. And they have, like, scars from Teldrassil on their body. And back then we were wondering, like, ooh, there seems to be a story here. Who is this Night Elf? How did they survive the burning of Teldrassil? What exactly happened there? And unfortunately, they don't tell the story before she's killed. And for me personally, when I kill something, after the fact, you can give me more details, but at the same time, there's still just a number under the ground, right? I say that very blatantly. Like, obviously, there are other examples, but in this case, I couldn't really particularly massively care about the story that followed up, because in essence, what they did was... I think her sister showed up in order to find her body, and they wanted to bury her under the tree, and then they were like, nah, she's not allowed in, she was like a primalist, and you have to make a choice. Are they going to let her in or not? And you learn about how she sacrificed herself with the burning of Teldrassil, and they presumed her to be dead. So there's a whole tragic backstory to this character, which was awesome, but by that time I already killed the character, you know what I mean? There wasn't any more evolution besides I've taken care of them, right? But it was still nice to get those details, better late than never. Then there's the Green Dragonflight, and the Green Dragonflight had a story that I was like, huh. I can't say I'm a big fan of what they've done here. And let me explain first what happened. So, as we've gone over the zones, we've spoken about how Ysera fell to the corruption of the Emerald Nightmare. We sent it off into the Shadowlands, and then we did the whole seed thing in Shadowlands where the Winter Queen connected her spirit, connected her soul to Ardenweald, right? She is now part of the Shadowlands. That's how the Winter Queen is done. Like, yes, she's still around, but it came at a bit of a price. I love Ysera, and I kind of thought that was an interesting development. I'm not gonna lie, that was one of the better parts that came out of Shadowlands. I quite like that storyline. Very nice callbacks to, like, the stars, and very nice music use in the cutscenes. So, like, oh, that's kind of sick, actually. So now she is bound to the Shadowlands, and she mentions, like, oh, maybe one day I will soar the sky of Azeroth again. And turns out that all it really required for her to come back to Azeroth was for Malfurion to take a nap in Ardenweald. And again, I say that very blunt because obviously there's more to it. Like, oh, she made her sacrifice for you, Malfurion Stormrage, and therefore you are connected. And if you sacrifice yourself and now take a nap under my tree, then Ysera can take your place in Azeroth. And I felt like that undermined the story that they've come up with before. Because I was like, oh, that's actually a sacrifice in order to connect it to Ardenweald. And then if I look at what they've done with Ysera in the storyline itself, Ysera comes in, and you gotta keep in mind that her daughter, Marifra, has been the aspect of the Green Dragonflight since Legion. The leader, right? And she already had a conversation with Alexstrasza in the Heart Chamber, where she's like, Alexstrasza, you knew my mum like nobody else. How do I do this? And Alexstrasza says something in the direction of, oh, they don't expect you to be Ysera, just be yourself. You got this, you got the power. You got the power. You can do it, you can do it. They had that conversation, and that was fine. And she did her thing. She fought against the nightmare that showed up again with, like, the empowering of the heart. It was fine. She was finding her footing. And then with Dragonflight, they bring back Ysera, and all Ysera does, again, it's a bit simplification, I understand, but all she does is she tells her daughter, you've got the power. You can do it, you can do it, you've got the power, you're even greater than I was. And I'm like, it's nice to see them hug, right? It's really cute to see them hug and be like, Mother, you're back, and it's like, oh, that's cute. But in the overarching, what role does Ysera play in the storyline, I'm like, why did you not just let Marifra do the thing? Did you really need to bring back Ysera out of the Shadowlands, nuke the story that you did back then, in order to What, have her as a cheerleader? Tell her daughter that she could totally do it? I don't know. For me, it didn't feel like, it was worth it. But either way, that's what happens. Marifra is put into the role of, like, leadership, and they reconnect with the Centaur, they fight against the bad guys, and later on we will go into the Emerald Dream storyline, but that's not quite yet. Kept it as a ghost! As well as removing Malfurion out of the storyline. Like, my man already gets to do so little. So little. Malfurion gets nothing. And you make him... You would have had the same emotion with just a spirit vision and cinematic, I guess. I mean, there was definitely the hugging technology. That was nice. They had a lot of hugging technology. Just finishing up getting all the exploration parts in this zone. Had a fight with Malfurion's voice actor? I don't know, man. Tyrande, my love, where are you? I just wish that Tyrande and Malfurion would get, like, more epic storytelling. I thought the Night Warrior arc went places, man. I've spoken about before. In the books, Malfurion and Tyrande are fucking beasts. They're animals. They are gods walking this world, and we are not worthy to look upon them. You enter their forest, you are dead. And in-game, it's... Alright, after that, we moved over into the Azure Span. And the Azure Span is the story of the Blue Dragonflight, where one of the later questlines, no jokes, no ambiguity, no lies, in my opinion, one of the best stories, one of the best quests, just period, one of the best quests can be found in this fucking game. Whoever wrote the Blue Dragonflight questline, you did real good, alright? You did real good, but that's a side story. We're gonna get to that later. But I genuinely mean that. Like, that is one of the golden eggs to come out of this era that I'm like, wow. If this was the quality that WoW offered all the time, 24/7, whole different ballgame. But in the Azure Span, we get the party with Sindragosa. And if you ever seen Black Mirror, where they make like a cookie out of somebody's brain, and they make like, she calls herself a simulacrum. Dat is lekker, hè? Simulacrum, zeker. And she's basically like a storage memory of the Sindragosa before everything went to so I need to edit that. Everything went to bad with the War of the Ancients. So for those that are unaware, Sindragosa is the undead dragon that you fight in Ice Crown. She followed Malygos as they went to the War of the Ancients, and they had this whole plan of like using the Dragon Soul against the Burning Legion, right? But little did they know that their brother, Neltharian, was listening to the Whispers of the Void, was corrupted, and turned the relic against them. Now, Malygos felt really responsible, because if you've ever done Yogg-Saron, maybe you're farming him out right now, he was one of the biggest advocates to do this plan, to give up a portion of their powers, to make the Dragon Soul. And so he felt responsible that they should be the ones to delete it. Which he tried to do, bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, magic, delete it out of this reality. But, again, they'd given up a portion of the power. Deathwing held on to the Dragon Soul. And, well, nearly the entire Blue Dragonflight got wiped out. Malygos and Sindragosa were knocked back. She tumbled all the way to Icecrown, where she started to crawl and try to get the Dragonblight, because that is where dragons want to go die. They had this whole lie about... I'm trying to remember now. That Galagrond was like this primordial dragon instead of what the actual story was. And she wanted to die, and she couldn't. And she died with hatred in her heart in Icecrown, where then many years later Arthas would bring her back in that intro cutscene for Wrath of the Lich King. But here we found a simulacrum of her, and Malygos, the new Blue Dragon aspect, right, gets to learn more about what life was for Sindragosa with the Blue Dragonflight. But he also learns the most important lesson of all, family. That's what it's all about. That's what he learns. Because we have the Tusker in the zone, but we also got the Gnolls. And the Gnolls are doing something interesting, a storyline that's still being left open. The Gnolls found their way into powers of decay. And we deal with the matriarch in the dungeon. But the matriarch gets away, and she's still out there somewhere. A storyline to deal with later. But the decay is kind of interesting because it could connect to the Trust and maybe a corrupted version of life and nature and all that. Kind of a cool storyline. We also got a Tusker. Tusker, of course, known as like the fish creatures, probably most popular from Wrath of the Lich King. A lot of players want them as like a playable race. And the Tusker, they live on these plains with like their fishing gear. Like very much what we saw in Wrath of the Lich King, but more, right? Oh yeah, the kitchen duty. Like the big things that you would do where you would get like, yes, chef, and you would like offer things to it. So yeah, welcome in everybody. Sit back, relax, hope you enjoy. So Caligos learned about family. We learn about the corrupted powers of decay from the Gnolls. Eventually, there would also be learning the language of the Furbolgs. Maguba, thank you very much for the Prime. Welcome, welcome. And there was like this PvP tower, which was kind of funny with the gameplay. But most of all, it was a storyline in which eventually, and I don't think they actually took this anywhere. Now that I think about it. So, there was this whole power of tower that Razakev really wanted to get her hands on. And Caligos gives out the signal to the Blue Dragonflight. It's all coming back to me now. He's calling the Blue Dragonflight home. But previously, he told the Blue Dragonflight, you know what? I love you, right? But listen. The age of mortals is upon us. We Blue Dragons, we could hang out in the Nexus if we want. But what if you want to hang out elsewhere? You can. I'm not the boss of you. They might call me Aspect, but really, I'm a cool boss. Yeah? You want to go live in Stranglethorn Vale? Go live in Stranglethorn Vale. Become a pirate for all I care. And they did. So, when he tries to call them all back to the Dragon Isles, and he's like, hey, listen, right? I know I told you all to go find a life and find things that you wanted to do for yourself, but I kind of need you now. And he sends out the call. And only the dragons from the from Legion, from the Broken Isles, show up at first, right? Give the others, you know, a moment. But they're the only ones who show up, and they show up just in time in order to stop Razakev from her plans for the tower. We defended together with Khadgar, which was kind of like Khadgar's only role to play in this entire fucking expansion. No, that's not fair. He also shows up in the vault, and we prevent their plans. There was another thing I wanted to mention here. Oh yeah, I remember now. I just hope I can find it. Can I find it? Is it marked? I don't think it's marked. Surely it's marked. It's not marked. No. Yes. Yes. Way back at the beginning, smart cookies amongst you send me screenshots. And they were like, Noble. I was like, yes. Noble. Yes. Nice beard, I know. But I found this weird dragon skeleton. What do you make of it? And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, I found this weird two-headed dragon skeleton. I was like, oh, cool, where did you find it? And so they pointed out the user span, and at the beginning I was like, yeah, I don't fucking know what that is. It's a cool two-headed dragon. Like, I don't know. And I don't think that they actually gave any story to this dragon. Although I'm trying to remember if the Archivist story actually had something in there. Trying to remember, maybe they did. But this is gameplay that they added, and honestly, I kind of wish that they would bring more of this back, because archaeology is dead right now. Like, they're not doing anything for archaeology, and I find it a bit of a waste, because, yeah, it was not top-tier gameplay, this was. I will admit. But it was fun enough, and if they could integrate bits of this into archaeology, it would actually freshen up the profession and make it a lot more fun. But either way, we learn more about the Archivist here, and they actually used the Dragon Bones. Then, from the Azure Span, and dealing with the Blue Dragonflight, and the Tusker, and the Furbolg, and the Gnolls, we moved on into the last leveling zone, which is Taldrassus. As we're flying over there. Okay. So here we are, in the last major leveling zone that we had, which is Taldrassus. And, Taldrassus dealt with the Bronze Dragonflight storyline, which took an interesting turn, because the Bronze Dragonflight storyline was always a little bit vague and always a little bit up its own ass. And that has to do with the Cataclysm. So, we got our boy Nosdormu, Aspects of Time, Bronze Dragonflight, they have the power over time. That is already a spicy situation, spicy way of telling your story, but in order to contain Nosdormu's vast epic powers over the times and the flows and everything that happens, the Titans made sure to show him his moment of demise. The moment in which Nosdormu dies, they showed him that moment. And they were like, listen, right? You might have the power over time and everything and the true timeline that you need to protect. But listen, listen, listen. There's one thing that you must never do. Don't fuck with your own timeline. You die when you're supposed to die. So, Nosdormu knows when he's supposed to die, okay? And what happens is that somewhere down the line, Nosdormu gets tricked by the old gods into subverting his own mortality. As we learn from the Morrizonde dungeon description, right? So, we go to the Cataclysm. We go to the End Time dungeon. And we go to Morrizonde, now living outside of time. Morrizonde was once the great dragon aspect Nosdormu, the timeless one. After the Titans showed him his own death, the tormented Nosdormu was tricked by the old gods into trying to subvert his mortality. As a result, Nosdormu shattered the time waves and created the infinite Dragonflight, jeopardizing the very future of Azeroth. That is what we learned from the dungeon journal at the time. And I've heard people make the argument like this is a variation of Morrizonde, this is an alternate version of Nosdormu, this is a possibility, but objection, counterpoint. When we kill Morrizonde in the End Time dungeon, Nosdormu stands next to him and goes like, you've done it, champions. My moment of demise, and so it goes. This is how I'm supposed to die. And I'm like, oh. So now they put themselves in a loop. Now we know that this is the moment that Nosdormu was shown. My moment of demise, this is how he's supposed to end, right? But how is that going to be possible? Because they took away his powers. Like, when is he going to be corrupted by the old gods? Because we were also running out of old gods. Is he going to go to Nyalofa? Is he going to go to the Void Domain? What's up? And they've taken some liberties. They've taken some changes. It's wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. And now what's happening is that it's actually the infinite Dragonflight that wants to create Morrizonde. And Sean Copeland did a video with Platinum WoW the other day about the Dastardly Duos fights. And one of the Dastardly Duo fights is an Infinite Dragon. In which Sean Copeland says, like, oh yeah, what we saw in the Caverns of Time with the Infinite Dragons, like trying to stop Arthas and whatnot. That was them trying to mess with the timeline, trying to create Morrizonde. That's what they wanted to do, right? So, alright. That's apparently what the Infinite Dragonflight is about. They want to create Morrizonde. And Nosdormu in the storyline is pretty stressed about this. You know, with good reason. If you know that you are going to corrupt and forsake and do everything and anything against those that you love, right? You might get a little bit stressed. And he got like cut scenes where you're like gripping his head and he's like, oh, Alexstrasza, it's getting closer and closer. I can feel it. My corruption. I don't want it. But then there is Chromie. Everybody loves Chromie, right? And Chromie is like, yeah, you're not gonna become corrupted. Leave it to me, Nosdormu. I got this. And you know what? She did have this. Because Chromie, even though he's not supposed to mess around with his moment of demise or whatever, Chromie is like, I'm just gonna prevent you from becoming fucking Morrizonde. And she does. With our help, we go into the End Time dungeon. And something interesting happens. It's a little bit future talk, but something interesting happens. In this moment, we deal with, like, you know, Nosdormu and the Dragonflights, like the infinite corruption coming. He knows that he's gonna become corrupted, right? He knows that's coming. Was there another secondary storyline? I mean, there's the first raid of all the Incarnates. There's Tierhold, the dungeon that we spoke about with, like, the waters corrupting the eggs and turning them into the more orderly assigned... That is a very pretty sky. What the fuck? Wow. What is that sky about? That is so cool. Is that the Soridormi event? Alright. There's like the academy that they train at. Well, Tierhold we spoke about. How Tyr was actually like corrupting things. And then of course the capital city. And... from the get-go, we noticed that there was like a spot at the top of the tower available for someone. And we were like, that's interesting. I wonder if they're actually going to place someone there. And they did. They would. You know, spoilers, but all the good stuff. I will say though, even though it runs like the city is very pretty. It's very stacked, it's very active, it's very heavy. Oh, we don't actually see it because she's not there yet. Ah, interesting. The city is laggy as hell, but it's pretty. And of course, dragon riding. Like gameplay mechanic wise, dragon riding added to the game. Game changer. Absolute game changer. This is so nice. I don't think we can honestly go back now that we have this. We're really pretty city, and a lot of intricate little stories that played out in the city as well. One of them comes to mind, which is more in the direction of, oh my god, what just happened, was somebody asked, like, were the Dragon Isles, were they like slumbering or were they active? And we know that the Dragfear were slumbering, but we also know that they were active because like the caretakers are like, ooh, after 10,000 years they've returned and we've maintained their cities and maintained their lands. And a story arose out of this, in which the caretakers, the ones that were left behind by the dragon aspects when they dealt with their whole, you know, the world is broken, they're like, yeah, but it's nice that you all came back, right? Nice to see you. Hello, how are you? But that does not mean that this is your land. You were away for 10,000 years. We kind of feel like this is our land now. And so a rebellion was growing in the background. And that storyline was, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, so please keep that in mind. But that storyline ended so weird, in which Alexstrasza goes through this storyline. And you gotta remember, she's been like the Queen of the Dragons for 20,000 years plus, right? And she goes like, huh, I had no idea that these people were upset that we just came back and we rooted ourselves into these lands. I had no idea that there was like this rebellion forming. But also, let me threaten you with your life if you ever try to dare revolt against me again. And it was the weirdest side story ever. I was like, what the fuck are we doing here? Why is this the development you're giving to Alexstrasza? Weird. Anywho, storyline goes on. So we dealt with the zones, and we've gotten closer. Alexstrasza is like, ooh boy, I do hope that by re-enacting our oaths to these stones, that we are going to get our powers back, right? Oh man, I do sure hope that we're going to be dragon aspects again. She does her thing, bibbidi bobbidi boo, and she is wrong. Drama. She is wrong. Razagev is cackling, is laughing at her at the top of the tower. She's like, ha 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 ha. You really think you were gonna get your powers back? Your gods have forsaken you. It is time for the Incarnates. And she flies off to the Vault of the Incarnates, where she knows that her kin has been locked away. And she's like, it's time to set them free. And Alexstrasza is like, oh no, gotta go. And we go in as well, right? And this brings me to another point where I'm like, Dragonflight, what the heck happened here? Throughout the storylines, throughout all of this, we learned about the Primalists. And the Primalists were this faction allied to the Primal Incarnates. But up to this point, we hadn't heard about the Primalists before. And all of a sudden, they sprung out of nowhere. And they were like a big threat that we had to deal with. And a lot of people were like, yeah, but hang on a minute. Who is this, you know, this guy setting her from prison? What is the connection to Magofa? What's happening here? Why should I suddenly care about these Primalists that show up? But it's like, okay, I'll go along with it. Maybe at least it's something interesting. And then we went into the Vault of the Incarnates. The first raid for Dragonflight. We go in. We don't learn anything else about these Primalists. Are they right? Are the aspects wrong? Maybe there's hints at more potential storylines to play out, but before we can even have a conversation, they're dead. And I remember being so disappointed that we killed Kurog without learning anything about Kurog. It's like, he is the pupil of Magofa. Is that not something worth to explore? It's like, nah, you just, you know, Primalists were there, now they're no longer there. What can I tell you? They're dead. You know, you did it, hero. Well done. Well done. They're taken care of. Like, all right, cool. So they're taken care of. And eventually we fight against Razagev. And we do the thing, right? We do the thing. We defeat Razagev. But not before Razagev is able to open up the prisons and set the other Incarnates free. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
No. The damage is too great. They're about to... What have they done to you? Her death demands vengeance. All who betrayed Dragonkind to the Titans will face our wrath.
Khadgar, we cannot win this fight. We have to get out of here!
Oh yeah. Iridacron's model. Honestly, the Prime and Incarnate models were fantastic. I very much loved them. Like I said, the disappointment is not like, oh, how dare you add them. The disappointment is like, I want to know more about them. And the same goes for the Incarnates. The book War of the Scaleborn did a lot of lifting. Added a lot of details on the time and the war. But per usual, like I think that those details should also be presented in the game. And while, again, you will get a baseline understanding as to like, okay, this is what the Incarnates are about. I feel like the book added so much more, and so too could the story have done it, right? So that was our intro into the Dragon Isles, as I take my list and I check out what exactly happened. So we went through the zones, right? I went to the hub. We've gotten the Dragfair that have joined, revamped talent and UI system, and dragon riding introduced, okay? Then it was Return to the Forbidden Reach. Oh, that was the pre-event. Oh, right. Uldaman, Legacy of Tyr. Okay. Return to the Forbidden Reach was the follow-up patch. Okay. Yes, that makes sense. Because there's actually a patch that I kind of dipped out on. I did the intro quest and I was like, I don't want to farm. So, in the introductionary part, we saw... we should play the cutscene, actually. It's an important cutscene. In the introductory bits, we saw Razagev released from prison, Rephion allowed to run away, and the storm took over the Isle, right? But now, Razagev is dead, and the storm has gone down. What more secrets are there to be found on the Forbidden Reach, the place where the Dragfear came from, right? And turns out that there was actually a big important part of a big important relic to be found. And I want to once again remind you that Iridacron did not dabble with the Void in the War of the Scaleborn. He actually made fun of Neltharian for using it. And now watch this cutscene and we'll talk about it in a moment.
The storm is receding. The Reach is ours once again. Take cover.
How are they, Lorecraft? Is it the aspects?
No.
Lorecraft is a they're a Dragfear that at the beginning, like I mentioned, we got those to join the Alliance, that goes to join the Hordes. They were like, I'm not serving any aspect anymore. F all of you, I'm gonna do my own thing.
Razageth's kin.
Like these models, man, they did so good though.
The last echoes of her storm are fading. She is truly gone.
We should be devouring her murderers' hearts.
Do not underestimate them, Farak. Our sister's overconfidence was her downfall.
I mean,
While the Aspect's power has waned, their forces grow stronger.
she did set you free, buddy.
We must even the scales.
I'm just saying, she did free you, right?
They kept so many secrets. From us. And even from each other.
Little bit of display of power, what they can do, right?
It is here. Neltharian's betrayal shattered their unity. Left fissures in their hearts. Yet the pain he inflicted was only the beginning.
There it is!
Aberrus. His hidden laboratory.
One last secret, deep within the earth.
Ooh.
The location of Aberrus must lie within this vessel. I will decipher its knowledge.
What use are Neltharian's twisted experiments to us?
The laboratory itself is of no consequence. But the molten fire that powers it, that we can use.
Keep eyes on them, Desrin. Whatever remains of Neltharian's legacy belongs to us.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is that Iridacron and Deathwing were not friends with one another, right? Deathwing would have not have told Iridacron, like, hey, listen, right, I'm gonna hide a trinket under the ground for you to pick up later. Which means that someone else must have told him. Somebody else who must have known about it. But who, right? Who would have known about that trinket, the coordinates to Aberrus, and what would eventually be more commonly known as the Dark Heart? So the question becomes, if Iridacron did not mess with the Void back in the War of the Scaleborn, unless he lied, right? But then why would you surrender yourself? Blah, blah, blah. When did he get in contact with Xal'atath? When did Xal'atath reach out? And could this also mean that Xal'atath had something to do with the creation of the Dark Heart? Considering that the Dark Heart allows them to take magic and convert it into the Void, and we've learned about her knowledge about the Kareshi converting anything into the Arcane. Did she manipulate Deathwing into making the Dark Heart, hide it away there as like a prototype, and then many years later get this whole plan going? I don't know. Would I don't know. Just throwing it out there, maybe. But all the same. Return for the Forbidden Reach was like a stepping stone into the next major patch. It was an in-between patch. I believe there was like a tower that you could farm in order to like open up the books. I did it later for the Battle for Azeroth meta. Yeah, Deathwing created the Dark Heart. Yeah. I know that the Wikipedia page for a while said that Iridacron created the Dark Heart, but that's not technically true. The trinket, the device, is made by Deathwing. It was a prototype before the Dragon Soul, which he hid away. Which is what they say in the cutscene, right? Like Deathwing, one of his last secrets, the coordinates to his laboratory. So they use it to find the laboratory. Then it gets into the hands of Iridacron, and he uses it to devour the corruption of Galakrond. But the Dark Heart is still the Dark Heart. Just because he uses it to suck out the corruption of Galakrond, does not mean that he created the Dark Heart. It just means that he used the Dark Heart in order to suck out the corruption of Galakrond, if that makes sense. The trinket was made by Deathwing, by Neltharian. And again, I know that it stood a while on the Warcraft Wikipedia page. I also know that it ended up in the video. But I corrected the page by now. Yeah. And for comparison as well, the Dark Heart is similar to the Dragon Soul, hence why indeed Xal'atath asked the Goblins to help her out, because she was like, you know, the Goblins helped out Deathwing make the Dark Heart. Sure, they can also help out, also make the Dragon Soul. Surely they can also help out make repairs on the Dark Heart. Yeah. Again, let's not talk about the death animation, about Dementias. I don't want to ban people today. Alright, so, Dark Heart's been picked up. Coordinates to the laboratory. They want to go there, they want to power, they got plans, and they will. And in between, we did the whole Forbidden Reach side patch, and we did the thing, right? So, next major patch was Embers of Neltharian. The remnants of Neltharian. The embers burying down. And, again, the coordinates to his laboratory led to a secret hidden by Deathwing. So Deathwing, he was the guy that prepped, that planned, that made their forces, that forged their weaponry. Deathwing was the guy that you would talk to about strategy and military things. And Deathwing would be like, yo, don't worry about it, baby. I'm the aspect of Earth. I got this. I'll protect us. I'll put up walls. I'll put up armaments. It's gonna be fantastic. I'll make some Dragonflight experiments that I won't talk to you about. It's gonna be mwah, right? And so, they allowed him to do a lot of things. But obviously, Deathwing was also listening to the Whispers of the Void. He was doing all kinds of mad experiments, darkness and corruption. Paranoid as hell, 100%. And his hidden secret laboratory is in the Zarlek Cavern, where Deathwing face. Oh, I didn't hear you that one. Ha! Where we met the Niffen. And I'm not gonna lie. I know that there's some out there that really love the Niffen. Can't say I'm a big fan of the Niffen. Niffen are moles. Like, they do everything by smell. They can't really see well. They got a city down below. We also had the return to Drogbar, the ones from Legion. I agree on the Niffen. The Dragonine. Thank you for the 2. But, you know, they were there. They were definitely there. And we joined them down below in order to discover more about what Deathwing's been up to. And in it, we found out a new substance called, I want to say Shadow Flame. I think it was simply called Shadow Flame. It was fire infused with the void. And our boy Firak was like, ooh, that's delicious. Nom, 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 nom. And he took it in him. Which of course we didn't like. Oh yeah, there were also the Jaredin. I completely forgot about the Jaredin. We met a Jaredin in like the Waking Shore, and this Jaredin was like blind and old, and he was telling us stories, right? He was telling us stories about the time in which the Jaredin ruled the world, and they were like epic dragon hunters, and they were like, oh, mortal. We had elders who went down below, and they came back with like fire burning in their veins. It was awesome. And if you ever run into those elders, ooh, oh, you're gonna be in trouble. If those elders ever rise up, you are not gonna win. And we kicked the crap out of those elders time and time again. They were nothing. Those stories were lies. They were nothing. We just killed them. It was Ridicron used to connect to the Earth to find it? Maybe. That could definitely be a thing. That could definitely be a thing. So, we eventually would see a continuation because, you know, Embers of Neltharian. Obviously, this was going to be the major Black Dragonflight storyline. And, unfortunately, what they decided to do with the whole battle between who is going to be the next aspect with Sibelian and Rephion, in order to point out someone that I don't even hate as an option to be the next leader, right? I actually made a video back in the day, like, who's going to be the leader, and I said actually, like, you know, I think so-and-so is going to be. But my problem is the way that they went about it. And that is that they dumbed down Rephion, and they made him worse in order to elevate Ebonhorn. And what do I mean by that? Well, as we've spoken about, in Battle for Azeroth, Rephion was our #1 Void expert, right? You get corrupted, he will have a potion to help you. He will get you a cloak, he will do it. But he steps into his father's laboratory, in this hidden domain, right? And he knows about the corruption of the Black Dragonflight. He knows intricately because he murdered all of them because they were corrupted. And he goes into his father's laboratory, and they talk with Sibelian. They're like, do you feel this presence? Like, yeah, man. Feels a bit shadowy, doesn't it? Bit dark, bit Nowhere does Rephion say, oh yeah, actually, Sibelian, I forgot to tell you, right? But, yeah, that's the Void. And I can give you a thesis on what the Void is about, what it will do to you, how you fight against it. No. He and Sibelian enter this rivalry of, like, 2 teenage dragons where they're, like, butting heads. And I'm like, didn't need to be that way. He could have still been our #1 expert on dealing with the Void. You didn't have to bring him down like that. And Sibelian could also just have played a part. You could still make Ebonhorn the leader without bringing those 2 down, right? But either way, What is really interesting and what is kind of cool and what I didn't pick up on during the raid itself, people pointed out afterwards, and I was actually really pissed off at myself for not noticing it. In the raid, you go in, and there is this spirit of Neltharian that talks to his sons, and it's like very corrupty, and it's like, ah, my sons, you would be proper follow-up for my kingdom. You would be amazing. Come in, come in. No one I created is for you. And obviously, it's Deathwing, right? Rephion dealt with the image of his father in the past. It's Deathwing. He doesn't particularly care about them. He tried to kill Rephion. Sibelian has been left on Outland. He didn't particularly care. But he was manipulating them, whispering to them. And it turns out that the Echo of Neltharian, this Echo, when they died, it turned like a faceless one. And I didn't pick up on the corpse transforming during the raid, because obviously you're raiding, you gotta go to the next fight, you gotta do it. But they actually turn into like a void creature. And I thought that was a really nice touch. I thought it was really, really cool. And on top of that, they also took Scale Commander Sarkareth. And Sarkareth basically embodied what both Rephion and Sibelian needed to learn, for some reason. Which is going for their father's legacy was not the way to go. It is a legacy, a history of corruption and darkness and falling far too deep. There was nothing good to get there. And they looked at him and they learned their lessons. And eventually they were like, you know what, Ebonhorn, you have been the least dickish of us all. You should be our leader. And everybody clapped and everybody cheered. And so Ebonhorn became the new aspect of Earth. We dealt with the Embers of Neltharian in the laboratory. But of course, Firak got like a bit of a power-up. We also had elders around. And yeah, we had to deal, right? You knew that the BCM would be the aspects. It was, like, out of the three options, it was definitely a choice. But it was a choice in... For me personally, it was a choice out of the least offensive one. Because Rephion kind of murdered his entire flight out of corruption. And wanted it for the sake of wanting it. But if I had to make a pure choice between Sibelian and Rephion, I would still give it to Rephion just because he's Rephion. But then you got Sibelian, and I felt like Sibelian just randomly showed up again. And they gave us far too little information to actually make a valid choice as to, okay, so what have you been doing on Outland? And how come you show up with these uncorrupted Dragon Eggs? And where have you been all this time? Why do you decide to show up now? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you used to be Team Deathwing, right? You used to be part of your daddy's army, and now you expect me to go like, oh, welcome back? I don't know, man. It was a bit of a sell. And then there was Ebonhorn. And Ebonhorn was guiding these leaders of the High Mountain Tauren for so many years. Like, yeah. And that's all he really did, so... You know. Good job. You can lead the rest of your flight now. And I don't hate Ebonhorn, so there's that. What was Alex Strauss's betrayal of Tyr? It did not happen. We had the little Tyr journey scenario with it. Yeah, it didn't happen. Might still happen, didn't happen. The Tyr story, I'm gonna go to that. The Tyr story is fucking weird. Really weird. We're gonna go to that in a moment. So, according to my lists, we've done the Caverns, there's the Firak Assaults, new Mythic Pool, Dragon Riding Drake. Okay. Then we got the Fractures in Time patch. The Mecha Dungeon, Dawn of the Infinite, where we kind of already spoke about it with Nosdormu feeling like, okay, my days are numbered, my corruption is coming. And Chromie telling him like, nah, not on my watch. We also got a cutscene in which we see Iridikron teamed up with the Infinite Dragonflight, holding the Dark Heart. And it's like, ooh, what's happening here? And, we joined Chromie in what I would argue is a really interesting story development. Now we can discuss like, okay, you changed the story of Nosdormu, or maybe this was always the plan. Doesn't really matter, like this is what they want to tell. But what happened was Chromie goes in and she first stops Iridikron, who went back in time with the aid of the Infinite Dragonflight. And he sucks out the corruption of Galagrond. That first threat of the dragons, potentially rooted in Yogg-Saron, at the very least, like Void and Corruption and all that. He sucks that up into the Dark Heart, and it gets all this power, right? And we stop him from doing that in round 1. Only to realize that if we stop Iridikron, Nosdormu becomes Morrisont, because the Infinite Dragonflight at the same time is corrupting Nosdormu. And so... Chromie is like, nah, we're not doing this. She goes back in time, tries it again, and this time we decide to go and save Nosdormu, staying off potentially, or entirely stopping him from becoming Murasant, but I'm guessing staying off because there's still an infinite Dragonflight, doesn't matter. Time travel, wibbly wobbly. But it did mean that Iridikron won with the Dark Heart, and a portal opened up, and it was like this elf silhouette behind him, revealing that he is in league with Zolotov, the Harbinger, right? So Iridikron jumps through the portal. Chromie saves the day with Nosdormu. There's a threat for later. But hey, at least we don't have to deal with Murasant right now, so that's nice. For the longest time, people have also been asking, like, are the Dragfear going to get a third spec? Because there was this side storyline about, like, this... I think they didn't have, like, the Black Dragonflight within them. And for the longest time, I was like, well, if they're gonna do a third spec for the Dragfear, that's something they want to be majorly about, right? Like, they want to announce it, they want to promote it. Nah, it turns out that they just did it. They just did it. Here you go. Third spec for the Dragfear. Enjoy. You can now become Augmentation. Yeah. So that was that. Then we have Fury Incarnates. That is a good question. What happened in Fury Incarnates? It must have been an in-between patch. So I'm guessing that is the one where... Oh, that must be. Okay. So, Fury Incarnates. As this goes on, like, Virenov is out, Iridikron is out. Yeah. And Firak is, like, getting more and more, you know, with the Shadow Flame and all that, to get more powerful. He's like, yeah, killing! I love killing. And Virenov is like, you're going off a little bit of the deep end. You know that, right? She's also not down with, like, the whole Darkheart situation, Iridikron disappearing on them. She's like, this ain't the way. And I will argue that pacing was an issue here. I don't have an issue with Virenov showing up and be like, hey, Alexstrasza, I want to join you again. What I do have a problem with is the pacing, because it was like that. It was like, oh, and she's turned around. It's like, oh, okay. But that is apparently somewhere where we needed to go, because in my mind, in my opinion, a lot of the storylines started to flow really quickly. And maybe with Fury Incarnate, it's a good time to actually talk about this. In the background, there was a storyline going on with, connected to, like, the War of the Scaleborn, with Tyr's corruption, and potentially bringing Keeper Tyr back. Keeper Tyr has been blown up by the Kafraks. And one of them was called Kifix, and the other was called something else. And the story behind that is that after he created the dragon aspects, the Titans were slain, they flew back into the Keeper bodies, and the Keepers got all kinds of confused, which allowed Yaxaron to do what old gods do best. Manipulate, take use of the opportunity, break his jailers back in Ulduar, right? So he managed to corrupt Loken, and Keeper Loken turned on the other Keepers. Which is why when we show up in Ulduar, you have to, like, save the Keepers from Yaxaron's control, right? But Tyr realized what was going on. And, sorry, I was reading that, Soko. So Tyr knew what was going on, and he was like, what the heck do we do now? We can't really fight back. So he decided to take the discs of Norgannon, which have been these discs left behind by the Titans, which have been, like, corrupting history since the dawn of Azeroth, like the true history. And together with Iron-Aya and Arcadus, they bolted. They took a bunch of the Vraiku and the forces. They bolted. They went, they ran, all the way to what we now call Titusfall. Loka finds out about this, and he's like, oh no, what do I do? The Titans are gonna find out what I've done. I'm gonna be punished. Oh, I've been bad. Oh, I've been real bad. And so he released these faceless ones that they had imprisoned, like I mentioned, Kafrux and another one. He sent them out on the hunt for Keeper Tyr. And Keeper Tyr told his friends, like, you guys go on. I'm gonna sacrifice myself in order to stop them. Which is why we call it Tyr's Fall. That's the place where Tyr fell. One of them was slain in the tomb, but started to slowly rise again, which actually killed Thoradin of Arator and would later play a part in the Legion artifacts, where Warrior struck the final blow, Zolotov ate him, and then Holy Paladins went in to get their hammer, the Silver Hands. And And the other one was able to survive a little bit longer for them to perish, to which the Loa and the Zandalari were like, don't mess with that spot, it's an evil spot, you should not do this. Until there was a troll who got his hands on Zolotov when she was in the blade, and she was like, you should totally do this. You should totally make some blood sacrifice. It's gonna be great, it's gonna be awesome. You should totally make some sacrifices. Imagine the power that you could have. Now Zolotov would of course present it a little bit more sexy, like, imagine the power you could have if you make a couple of sacrifices. Just a couple, a little bit of blood, you know, murder some people. Well, it's a little bit murder, you know, a little bit murder. And they did. And then they were all murdered. And a bunch of bones were left behind. And now they had to deal with a Faceless One. And the Zandalari gathered all the troops and they battle. And they managed to defeat it. And then for some reason decided to put their city on top of it, which we now call Zulaman. And considering that in the next patch in Midnight we're going to go back and like reunite the Elven Lands and Quel'Thalas update, I would be highly surprised if Zulaman is not going to play a part in all of this. But that's for later, right? What was I talking about? Keeper Tyr, dead in the ground, bam! But turns out that he gave the dragons like this silver scale, and there's like the option of getting fragments of his memory back from the past or whatever, and we like unite with the infinite Dragonflight, and Nosdormu learns that sometimes messing with time is actually okay, even though he has like this sacred charge of keeping the true timeline guarded, and the infinite Dragonflight learns that it's actually sometimes okay to let time go as it's supposed to, because then, you know, things happen as they're supposed to be, you can save little ones, like, for some reason the infinite Dragonflight and the bronze Dragonflight are coming closer together, and they're kind of working together now. How does that work? I don't fucking know. Maybe the whole destiny and the path of there's a true timeline is false. I've done videos on this. I do not know. What I do know is that they worked on bringing Keeper Tyr back. And there was this big quest line in the background. But just to remind you, Keeper Tyr is the reason why there was this big war between the Incarnates and the dragon aspects. Keeper Tyr is the reason why Viranov and Alexstrasza have these really high-stake drama storylines where like, I didn't mean to, but you did, but I didn't mean to, right? There's the whole conflict of the war that rests on Tyr's shoulders. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't bring Tyr back, but I'm just saying maybe we should have some conversations about this. Not to mention that as we go through the Tyr questline, we go back into the past and we realize that when Tyr blew himself up, he was actually shown bits and pieces. And one of them was that Alexstrasza was going to betray him. And they were like, okay, just keep this to yourself, right? Alexstrasza doesn't need to know that we learned about this. Just keep this to yourself. And it's like, that's interesting. Also, as I think about it, in this questline, we went back into Suramar time period because we needed, we needed this disc that we lost in like the dungeon revamp. And we needed this disc in order to like restore the powers or bring back Tyr or whatever the fuck we did. And this disc ended up in the hands of an alternate version of Alicent from Suramar, right? And we try to fight her, and then we try to fight her, and every single time, because she, you know, she controls time and all that, you don't fight her, she just rewinds time. Up to the point where one of them goes like, wait! Can we talk about this? And we use some talk fu, and she's like, oh, I got everything from the disc that I needed anyways. And then she goes through like a portal, and we change that timeline, and nobody cares. Doesn't matter. We're gonna bring Tyr back. And we did. And that's what I mean with like these storylines seem to be going really, really, really fast, because Tyr is back and no consequences really happened. And I was genuinely expecting that when Tyr brought back, there was going to be discussion between Viranov and Alexstrasza. There was going to be discussion between Viranov and Tyr. Like, why did you corrupt our ex? Why did you dominate us? Why did you decide this destiny for us, this conflict? Nothing. He's just back, and everybody's like, yay! Ooh, ooh, ooh. Tyr's back, everybody! It's great! And I'm like, it's not great. That is an asshole. That is a big asshole. What do you mean it's great? No! But nah, it's great. Tyr's back, and he goes around, and he just looks around. And he looks around, and then he goes sit on his chair, and he's like, yep, I am back now. And I'm like, why did I bring you back? Why are you back? What is your purpose? Not for the story progression, obviously. What is your purpose? And he's like, yeah, I'm sitting here now. That's nice, eh? Hey, what a wonderful world we got going on. He's like, oh, okay. Guess we just needed you back for whatever's happening in the next expansions? I have no clue. Either way, Tyr's back. For the final time. That's honestly what I was thinking. So, in the same vein as to why I'm like the ending of Dragonflight as a whole with like re-empowering the aspects. I think that this is because there's this vision from Velen, right? From the Anduin short story where he looks in the sky and there's all these dragons flying above. I think there's going to be this big end battle where they want to throw everything we've ever seen before. And of course we needed the dragons for that as well. That is my expectation with what they've done here. I don't know. But then it feels like this is done for the sake of having it ready for something else. Because it's not used in a moment, right? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because we also had Guardians of the Dream. In which we go into the Emerald Dream and we raid a Mirdrasil. And this is a storyline that is basically... Like, you know how they do the World Soul Saga these days? You could call this the World Tree Saga. Get it? World Tree Saga instead of the World Soul Saga. Because this saga begins with the burning of Teldrassil in Battle for Azeroth. And Tyrande being like, I'm not gonna go for peace. You can all suck it. I will not relent until I bask myself in the blood of the Banshee Queen. Until her head is on a pike. There will not be peace between us and the Horde. Into Shadowlands, where she took a nap. And she felt a lot better. And then she decided there will be peace between the Alliance and the Horde. Because we got something else to focus on now. We're gonna go for renewal. And they took all the spirits of the burned, tormented Night Elves that were willing to do so. They dropped themselves into that seed, right? And then that seed with the power of like Elune and the Winter Queen and all that was handed over to Tyrande. And like, here you go. New World Tree. New start for the Night Elves. Call it Teldrassil if you like. Problem solved, right? Bibbidi bobbidi boo. So we take that seed and we see Tyrande work with Marifra and they plant the seed in the Emerald Dream where it grows and it grows and it grows. But where there's power, there's also those that want to claim it. And we already saw the Primal Incarnates try to break through the Emerald Dream and like get the barrier going. And that tree is growing and growing and growing. And now Firak is setting his sights on it as well. And in its most vulnerable moment is when Firak, he gets like his axe out. The Dream Render, whatever they call it. And he's like, oh boy, it's barbecue time! For a second round. They were like, nah, we can't let this happen. So we got Virenov on our side. We got the dragons on our side. The Dream must be defended. Malfurion, unfortunately, isn't there. Because, again, he took a nap and Ysera came out. But it was time to, like, rally our forces. Azeroth unite. There was even a whole Marvel cutscene, which you honestly should see. Because it was quite the Marvel.
Well done, champion. Now we must.
Oh no! Lifebinder!
It seems your reign is finished, Alexstrasza.
You once fought for an ideal, Farok. Now, you merely seek power.
Yes. And you are in my way.
That's what I loved about Firak. Alright? I don't care what anyone says. That's what I loved about him. She calls him out and she's like, oh, you're only in this for power. And he's like, yep. Yep, that's exactly right. What? What are you going to do about it?
Mirdrasil will never be yours. Your obsession will destroy you.
Oh, this is your end, Alexstrasza.
Although I will admit that the whole no you got old real quick. Where they just turned it around on each other like, you will die here. No, you will die here. Well, actually, we'll all die here.
The Dragon Queen dies alone.
Never alone, Garrosh.
Not alone.
He did it. He threw his weapon away again.
Do you not see? All of Azeroth stands united against you.
time to end this. You will all fight together.
And I know opinions are divided on this cutscene. I've seen people really love it, and for me, it's just it just does not hit well enough. I'm like, nah, that's fine. Like, that's great. It's an opinion thing, and it just did not hit for me. I know what they tried to do, but you know. But yeah, Azeroth United. Firak is like, I'm done waiting now, because they've been trying to get into the Dream and into like Amir Drasil. But he's like, I'm done waiting. I'm just gonna dive deep into my power, and we did. And inside of it, like this whole war played out, and a lot of people lay down their lives and all that. All for the sake of this world tree. Like a lot of people united, like this world tree is gonna be very important. The world needs it, healing and all the good stuff. So a lot of forces came together in order to make this happen. For the Horde, it was also I think a callback to like the Burning of Eldrasil. Although honestly, the Horde Alliance storytelling these days is it's weird. But all the same, went into the Emerald Dream. We're following a tree around and planting little seeds. And then we went into the raid. And one thing in the raid that we did notice, or what was kind of interesting in the books as well, is that they started to suggest the idea that what we saw of the Emerald Dream was was only part of it. That what we saw of the Emerald Dream was what the Titans were able to bring order to, and that if you go beyond, you actually end up into the wild side of the dream, the actual Emerald Dream. And I thought it was a really interesting concept to deal with. So we saw more of the Emerald Dream, similar to how we fought with the Emerald Nightmare before. For some reason, the keepers of the dream were unable to like follow the orders of Marifra, so we had to put them down. There were also corrupted forces in there with flames and whatnot. We had to put those down. There was this druid that we dealt with. And this whole slander of Tyrande that I'm now trying to think, like, did we actually finish it up? I'm not exactly sure. But ultimately, we reached the top of Amir Drasil. And we reached the top of the tree. And we had to stop Firak, right? Like, we had to stop Firak from destroying the tree. The Night Elves' only hope. This is their spirits. This is everything that's relied on. And we did. And then the most magical thing happens. Because Firak didn't get like a kill cutscene. Firak just kind of died. Because we had to focus on more important things. This one. So I wanna preface this. I didn't leave out any of the storytelling. The re-empowerment of the aspects was an element at the beginning. It failed with Alexstrasza, and then they didn't really go back into that idea. We just dealt with the Incarnates as is. We do what we always did, which is, you know, overcome the odds, do what we need to do. And then this happened. And let me tell you, was I confused in that moment? If you're wondering, like, what just happened, they just got re-empowered. And they just got re-empowered because Amir Drasil / Azeroth felt like it. It wasn't... Like... It wasn't why we went into the Amir Drasil raid. It just kind of happened. It's not being used afterwards, because yeah, we got aspects again. And especially when it comes to Viranov, I'm confused. Because, okay, you re-empowered the other aspects because you wanted to empower them again. It was a little bit, you know, ham-fisted in there. But okay, you wanted to empower them. Fair enough. You wanted to, even though you've done Dawn of the Aspects, Day of the Dragon, Night of the Dragon, Twilight of the Dragons, Dawn of the Age of Mortals. Okay, you wanted to reverse the clock. Whatever. What I don't understand is Viranov. Because her whole motivation so far has been to be upset about the enforcement of the Titans. So why would she be okay with becoming an aspect? Unless you're arguing that this is not aspect powers, but it's something else. And this is where we go into the next cutscene, which is the final conversation. Here we go. And then it becomes all the more confusing.
How can this be? Our spectral powers have returned?
This is not the Titan's magic.
It's not.
This is of our world,
It is.
yet unlike anything I have known.
What does that mean? Does that mean that Azeroth is actually not a Titan then? But then, what do you mean with the blessing of... Yeah, but exactly. Isn't Azeroth a Titan, though? Like, at this point. What are we talking about here? So, it's aspect powers, but not rooted in the Titans. But it's apparently okay to become an aspect as long as it's not rooted in the Titans. Because that was not her point, though. Viranov's point was not so much like, oh, no, it's because it's the Titans. Like, she didn't want to be transformed. It's like... And now she's just brought on to the team and be like, yeah, I'm okay with this now. So, alright, cool. Anyways, we got aspects again. Yay! Now, back to the topic of discussion is, okay, how does that work for the empowerment? And wait for it, like we can goof and gag about it. I don't even know, Blizzard knows. We know that at this point, the soul inside of the planet is more than just a Titan. As with the red line in the background with the war within. It is now called a Prime World Soul. Which on its own has implications as to, okay, if this was the Prime World Soul that the Titans were really looking for, why did they leave it alone? If this was the one thing that they really needed, why did they leave it alone? That's still very much a question in my mind, but, you know, whatever, they did. And apparently this blessing is not of the Titans, but this Prime World Soul. So what does that mean about what's inside the planets? How does that correlate with every story that we've known so far, from a Rephion eating the heart and going like, oh, we must rebuild the Final Titan, to the Final Titan expansion coming up, to all of that? That is up to Blizzard to fill in. Up to this point, what we know is that there's a blessing that came out of a Mirdrasil. Apparently Azeroth was like, you know what, you really should be getting... your powers back. Let's go for it, right? To the question, by the way, like, what about that story arc with the O-Stones at the beginning? I've heard it described as a red herring not going anywhere, but personally, I liked it because Alexstrasza never says, like, this is guaranteed to give us our powers back. She's like doing a Hail Mary. She's like, you know, this happened in the past. Maybe if we do it right, we can get our powers back. And she's wrong. And I kind of like that. Because it meant that we had to do it on our own, as we always do. And I think that's part of the problem with the empowerment of the aspects. Because there's nothing that they can throw this against. They are being empowered just for the sake of it. Just for the hell of it. Because there was no threat to deal with anymore. We dealt with Virak when they were not the aspects, right? We did what they feared we were impossible to do. So the whole empowerment doesn't land in the overarching story. It might land in what's coming next. But that means you're now doing things for the sake of we need them to... I don't know. Prepping things to come in. I guess. Perhaps I had to leave to try and deal with Sargeras. So the way that I understand it with like why they left Azeroth behind in the original story was that Azeroth was just one of many. And the corruption that was contained, and she were allowed to grow. And they were like, you know, it's going to take a long time. We got other things to do. You're not our only concern. Bye-bye. But it's been altered in the way that they've now described Azeroth as this Prime World Soul. And the Titans have looked in the cosmos far and wide to find this one Prime World Soul. And they did test, and they were like, oh, mamma mia, that is the World Soul we're looking for. And with that minor alteration, you've now changed the story from... there were more out there to they found what they were looking for. If this is truly the one object that they needed, why would they leave, right? what happened there. And they can fill in stories. They can definitely make arguments about, oh, you know, that our attention was drawn elsewhere. But that does need to be filled in, right? And why do they need the world so? According to the archive, it's because they want to... I think they want to, like, rewrite it. They want to, like, bring order to the entire thing. Something like that. I had to double-check the archives. So, yeah. Aftermath of Dragon Isles, as we are definitely recording. Aftermath of the Dragon Isles. Keep in mind, by the way, I'm a little bit overplaying. The ending of the cutscene is not that big of a deal. Like I said, compared to Shadowlands, where we came from, where they retroactively dove into the entirety of the storyline and were like, okay, we're gonna just break things down and we're gonna rebuild it. Dragonflight, for me, was a breath of fresh air. With questlines and moments that I'm like scratching my head over, but also really wonderful things. Now that I think about it, when did they do the Blue Dragon questline? It's not on my list. Huh. Oh well. One thing that I haven't talked about is, again, without any ambiguity, without lying to you, without making a clickbait title, without going like, oh, this is something that changed the thingy forever. I think that the Blue Dragonflight questline that they did in Dragonflight is one of their best works ever. Ever. And I mean that because basically the other dragons are needed to be recruited across the world of Azeroth, right? And we need to go out and we figure out, like, okay, what happened to the Blue Dragonflight as they found their own place in the world. And there's humor in there. There's fun little moments. There's one like a hot tub and one that became a pirate and like one in debt. You need to help them out and you bring them all together. It also deals with giving Malygos and Sindragosa a peaceful rest. Dealing with a big topic for the Blue Dragonflight. But what I most of all liked about it, and I think her name was Tiragosa. Tiri was... Please correct me if I got the name wrong. But Tiri was a dragon in the novel Thrall, Twilight of the Aspects. And in that book, there was this 5-headed behemoth of a chromatic dragon. And she was captured by the Twilight Father, the guy that you fight in the Dragon Soul. Kiragosa, thank you. The guy that you fight in the Dragon Soul, that's like, there's only power! That one. They'd capture her. And they were planning to have her mate with the 5-headed dragon. Now, thankfully, she was also the sister of the child of Malygos, who betrayed the Blue Dragonflight or tried to Deathwing. There's a quest line from the Cataclysm where they appoint Caligos as the new aspect, with like the moon lining up and all that. Her brother was the one like, oh, how dare you? And her brother gets slain. It's a whole thing. But point being, Kiragosa went through it, right? Kiragosa went through fucking hell and beyond in that storyline. And she sought out a life of her own. And they go to Pandaria, and we find her again, and she has a life of her own. It's really cute, and they like fly around, and she's like, Kalik, go check out my life. And he's like, oh man, that's a really nice life. And he asks her, like, hey, Kiri, we could really use you. You want to come back? And you know what they do? She says no. And he respects it. He's like, you know what? You're right. You've been through too much. You stay here. You got a beautiful life going. And I was like, that is such a beautiful way of respecting a character that you build up, a storyline that came before, just the history. And like, this is really, really cool. And then we go back and we deal with the threats and all that. And then they added another bonus on top of that, which is if you've done the legendary questline back in the Firelands, there is that Tiri? Tiragosa's Rest? Tiragosa's Wrath? Taragosa. Jesus, man. I need to relearn my dragon names. Thank you. You can get a legendary staff. And in the questline, they're like investigating what's happening, and she gets killed, and then her spirit or whatnot, and she becomes this legendary weapon. And there was this effect that you could use in order to transform into her, right? And what they did with this questline, if you've done the Blue Dragon questline on a character that has done that epic legendary questline, it now became a mount. And so any character in your collection that has done that questline Can I show it? I should go to my Zwelgje. Can use that transformation permanently as a mount. I thought it was kind of cool. What's the name of Alexstrasza's consorts? All of them. I don't know all of them. Coriolstras, Vilastras, and that's about where I'm going to end. There's the one in Blackwing Lair, the second one that you kill. Then there's Coriolstras, and there was one old man that killed himself during the Dragonstall story arc with Ronin. You like the dragons? Name all of them. Damn. I will say, like, I did the War of the Scaleborn book, and I made, like, a list of all the units. Fucking hell, that was a project. Fun, but my lordy. Tirnastras. There you go. It was a project. So yeah, really, really cool Blue Dragonflight questline. Terragosa. You can transform into her. And you can use her as a mount. I fucking love that. It's so good. So yeah, if you haven't checked out the questline yet, would highly recommend it for Dragonflight. And then for the Aftermath. The Aftermath is in the sense of... Okay, so we got the aspects empowered. Keeper Tears back. We basically dealt with the problems that the flights were having. The World Tree Saga is over. The Night Elves got a new home. Ysera goes back to the Shadowlands. And Malfurion comes back in. And he hugs it out with Tyrande. And a big thing that they're doing now is that the old guard is handing it over to the new guard, which I kind of like. I wish it would be done better, but, you know, I do like that there's new, fresh characters that are supposed to become part of the storyline. So Malfurion and Tyrande decide to go retire, and they pass on the reins to Tyrande of Chandris. I'm reading chat at the same time. I shouldn't be doing that. So they leave the reins to Chandris in a similar way that Gen Greymane gave it over to Tess. And he's like, you do it now. Belmont, I should put you on the mic. You can't see it, YouTube, but I got Ryan Belmont in the chat. And they're giving me, like, dragon names. And they're filling in what I'm talking about. It's beautiful. In the case of Dragonflight, again, like I said, especially from how far it had to go, I really like Dragonflight. I had a good time at Dragonflight. Despite how negative I might sound, I had a really good time at Dragonflight. I was raiding with the guildies, playing the game. I had a ball, man. I had a good time. But maybe also because there's been more changes on a development level. In the sense of toning down how much time it is required in order to keep up. I personally feel like the Blizzard developers are also getting a lot more chill these days. So overall, I had fun with Dragonflight. Despite its ending. And I had a good time. And then, of course, like the build-up with the War Within and the voice ringing out. And I could say, like, I'm not going to take Zovaal through the War Within quite yet. I think that might be a bit too soon. Maybe when we're in midnight, but I don't know, man. I think we should let it simmer a little bit. Because we're doing, like, the World Soul Saga. So it's 3 parts. But if you're asking me right now, for me, the War Within gameplay-wise is fantastic. I find myself playing WoW a lot more in the War Within than I have in quite a while. That's also because I have an active guild, but I really like the raids. I really like the mythic system. I really like the hero talents. I like playing it on heroic and on my casual way. I love getting achievements and collecting. And honestly, there are so many events that are playing out in WoW these days. I sometimes have a hard time keep up, and I can do this as a profession. Alright? I play WoW as a job. I cannot imagine how someone who has, like, other shit to do in their life can keep up with WoW. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. Story-wise, again, it's a mixed bag. It did some really strong side stories, especially, like, with the Dementia, with the Irvin. Fantastic. The overarching campaign, I enjoy. But I'm definitely missing a bit of depth, and I'm definitely missing a bit of quality that I'm like, where did it go? Because they can do quality, mind you. Like, if I'm looking at the Karesh patch coming up, I love that campaign. I think it's phenomenal what they've done with the Kareshi and the Ephirials. But then I look at Undermine, and I'm like, we didn't go surface level, right? And if I look at how quickly we resolved things on Kesogar at the start, where we go with the destruction of Daladon and Khadgar's death to, oh, by the way, we reset everything and Zolotov is defeated, I'm like, huh. Not to mention the in-between patches, but I find it really hard to judge the in-between patches. Like, a Siren Isle, it doesn't... For me, the in-between patches, it's either nothing or an in-between patch. But I'm starting to think, like, maybe... Like, especially when we're looking at, like, a Pride of Arator, I'm like, I don't know, man. This is... It's still lore. It's still you're telling a story. I can't write that off as, like, oh, it's just an in-between patch. Nah, it's story, right? The War Within story, I feel like we haven't done anything. Pacing, definitely a thing. Yeah, but like I said, it's hard to... And the starting campaign was good. Yeah, I thought it was enjoyable. Yeah. But also really quick, right? And like I said, I'm having a good time with it. And it's struggle. I heard this the other day as well. Like, I was sitting here vibing, like, being like, oh, man, I had such a good time in Undermine. I can't wait for the next patch. And just... People checked out. And, like, it's not connecting, it's not vibing. It's such a fucking shame. It really is. But... Can't change that, I'm afraid. I wish I could. Oh, but for me, you know, I can only, per usual, all these things, I can only speak from my end, innit? And that is all I can really offer on these things, like opinions and all that good stuff.